In Palestine, citizens rally in Ramallah to mark the 76th anniversary of the Nakba. In Brazil, the Chamber of Deputies approved the suspension of the payment of the state of Rio Grande do Sul's debt to the Treasury for 3 years. And in New Caledonia, authorities reported 2 people killed and several hundred injured during the second night of protests over changes to the local electoral roll. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Palestinians rally in Ramallah to mark the 76th anniversary of their Nakba, or catastrophe, during the 1948 war that followed Israel's creation. Around 760,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes, and many took refuge in what would later become the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Sirens have gone off throughout Palestinian cities for 76 seconds, marking the 76th year that have passed since the 1948 catastrophe. As the sirens went off in Ramallah, everyone fell silent and raised 2 fingers in the air as a sign of victory and demand of peace. And while Palestinians marked 76 years since the Nakba in Gaza, over 500,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced in recent days amid intense Israeli attacks across the Strip. According to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, some 450,000 Palestinians have been expelled from Rafah in the last week, following a ground operation by Israeli forces widely criticized by the international community. Meanwhile, in the north, over 100,000 people were displaced as Israeli tanks have pushed into densely populated neighborhoods in Jabalia and met with fierce resistance and attacks in Gaza City target already displaced civilians sheltered at a UN facility. The Israeli occupation army committed a new massacre on Wednesday by bombing a health center of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Gaza Strip. In this way, 10 displaced civilians were killed and several wounded in the airstrike on the facilities of a United Nations-affiliated clinic in the Sabra neighborhood south of Gaza City. On the other hand, Israeli bombardments were also reported on the town of Jabalia and the Bureish refugee camp, killing 9 civilians, including children. Meanwhile, local media reported that Israeli tanks entered densely populated neighborhoods of Jabalia facing Palestinian resistance fighters. We stay in Palestine, where dozens of wounded civilians were transferred on Wednesday to Al-Aqsa Hospital in the city of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza following Israeli attacks in the area. In this sense, entering the 222nd day of the Israeli genocide, health officials reported that the number of people killed has reached 35,173, most of them children and women, while more than 79,000 have been wounded. In addition, thousands of bodies remain buried under the rubble and have not been recovered due to the continuous siege by Israeli troops. In this context, the UN's International Court of Justice will hold hearings on Thursday and Friday to discuss new emergency measures sought by South Africa over Israel's attacks on Rafah. The request is part of an ongoing case brought by South Africa against the Tel Aviv regime in January, accusing it of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. On Sunday, Egypt joined Turkey and Colombia in formally requesting to join the case against Israel. The Prime Minister of Qatar assured that the ceasefire talks on Gaza reached an impasse after the Israeli regime's military offensive in the Rafah region. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, he assured that the Israeli military operation in the city of Rafah in southern Gaza had caused the ceasefire negotiations with Hamas to be delayed. He also assured that Doha will continue with its efforts to resolve the situation that increases the tension in the region. Meanwhile, the spokesman for the Qatari Foreign Ministry stressed that the Tel Aviv regime has not demonstrated commitment and that the proposals they put forward are non-existent.
As we have said before, we have reassessed and re-evaluated our role in the negotiations. This was pushed by our need to evaluate the seriousness of the parties in reaching an agreement. It is clear to us that there is no roadmap towards an end to this war on the Israeli side, and that the goals they set on the ground are unrealistic. Therefore, there must be a different direction in order to reach a different result. Now we're going through a stalemate.
Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maher al-Ansari said that the Israeli side is not committed to a ceasefire in Gaza.
Suffering is suffering in the West Bank and Gaza. The ongoing attacks by settlers, starting from the attack on the land, the attack on farms, the attack on the ability of the land to produce life, and ending with the continuous incursions into the Blessed Alaska Mosque. If these violations show anything, they are ongoing evidence that the Israeli party is not serious about reaching a state of peace. The failure to stop these attacks and their continuation in this way, in light of the current situation and in light of the involvement of the parties in mediation to end the war in the Gaza Strip, is undoubtedly an indication of a lack of seriousness.
In this context, the Palestinian resistance continues to confront the Israeli occupation army, which is advancing its genocide against the citizens in the Gaza Strip. Israel announced that at least 19 of its soldiers were wounded in the last 24 hours following an offensive launched by the Palestinian resistance movement in the Gaza Strip. Since October 7, 2023, the Israeli occupation has acknowledged that some 1,660 people have been killed and more than 3,415 wounded. For their part, the Palestinian resistance forces warned that the Israeli government deliberately hides the number of their deaths. Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Those stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil's Chamber of Deputies approved the suspension of the payment of the state of Rio Grande do Sul's debt to the Treasury for 3 years following the floods that have left more than 140 people dead. The measure proposed by the government of President Luis Inacio da Silva to mitigate the tremendous economic impact of the climate tragedy in the region will now be analyzed by the Senate. The executive branch defended that during the suspension, interest on the debt will not be counted either, with the aim of recovering the economic capacity of Rio Grande do Sul shortest possible time. With the suspension, around 10% of this amount will be destined for the reconstruction of this territory, where heavy rains have partially or totally flooded entire cities in the last 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Brazilian authorities have raised the death toll to 148. According to the latest Civil Defense Bulletin published, the biggest climatic tragedy in the history of the southern region of Brazil has also left 124 people missing and 806 injured. 540,000 people have been displaced from their homes and more than 440 municipalities have been affected by the disaster. As part of the work carried out, the Brazilian government set up a field hospital in which around 20,000 professionals from the region are working. In addition, more than 81,000 people have been accommodated in shelters. Brazilian President Luis Inacio da Silva denounced that the extreme right wing spread news about the tragedy in Brazil and that the lack of information harms the work and assistance in Rio Grande do Sul. So media reported that at least 20 fake news circulated 2 weeks after the beginning of heavy rains in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul and were spread by politicians and artists linked today to the extreme right. The son of former President Jair Bolsonaro said President Lula da Silva only took measures 4 days after the rains began. Other opposition politicians also spread some false information about alleged detentions of trucks and forecasts to cope with the situation. In this context, the President of Brazil, Luis Inacio da Silva, posted the following on the social media X. Fake news and misinformation harm those who are working and those who need assistance in Rio Grande do Sul. Share the truth. The president of the new BRICS Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, announced that the entity will allocate funds to rebuild urban and rural areas affected by the floods in Rio Grande do Sul.
The new development bank, The BRICS Bank is at the side of the Gaucho people. I want to announce that we are going to allocate $1,115 million, the equivalent of approximately 5,750 million reals, in resources from the new development bank to help the state of Rio Grande do Sul and the Gauchos who adopted me more than 50 years ago. To overcome this tragedy, I want to reiterate my solidarity with the Gauchos and the federal and local government. The BRICS Bank has a commitment and will act in the reconstruction and recovery of the state's infrastructure, and we want to help people rebuild their lives.
In other news, in Venezuela, hundreds of workers gathered to collect signatures in rejection of the sanctions imposed by the United States government. Under the slogan, "Biden lift the blockade now," citizens went to Plaza Bolivar in the city of Caracas to demand the definite lifting of the unilateral coercive measures imposed by Washington. During the day, workers reiterated their support to the administration of President Nicolas Maduro. It should be noted that these mobilizations have been registered throughout the national territory, where citizens take to the streets to express their rejection against the United States. The first vice president of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, called the European Union disrespectful for lifting sanctions only against the Venezuelan National Electoral Council.
Congress of the Youth, for you to see the rudeness of the wrongly named European Union, the lack of respect to the people of Venezuela, the lack of respect to the powers of the Venezuelan established in the Constitution, they said they're not going to lift the sanctions while the elections are being held. Do not be ridiculous. We don't need you to lift sanctions against us. We have shown you that in spite of the sanctions, we have come out ahead. And we will continue to come out ahead. You're ridiculous, very ridiculous. You have a colonialist mindset. You think you own the world.
Diosdado Cabello also assured the country does not need the European Union's presence to hold the upcoming presidential elections.
We don't need you, gentlemen of the European Union. You are evil for the world. You're harming the world a lot. You think you're superior to the rest of the countries. You're building a hegemony based on hatred. Why are there sanctions against Venezuela? To steal our assets. Who has stolen the assets? A good part of the European Union. That's why we applaud the dignity of the electoral authorities that in a communique made this clear to them. It's like saying, well, taking into account that you are behaving well, we're going to lift a few sanctions. Who are you to say who is behaving and who is not behaving, gentlemen of the European Union? You have no morals.
We have a fun short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In the Fresh Island territory of New Caledonia, at least 2 people were killed and several hundred injured in the second night of violence in protest over changes to the local electoral roll approved by France. The Office of the High Commissioner of France's top representative in New Caledonia confirmed 2 killings on Wednesday without giving details of the circumstances. Although heavily armed security forces were deployed throughout the capital, Nouméa, and a nighttime curfew was ordered, the clashes continued throughout the night almost unabated. Protests in the archipelago come amid a decision by the French Parliament to approve a reform of the New Caledonia electoral roll. The measure was approved at midnight on Wednesday by the National Assembly in Paris by 351 votes to 153. It establishes that people from the metropolis who have lived there for a minimum of 10 years will be able to vote, weakening the electoral weight of the native population, mostly pro-independence. French President Emmanuel Macron called a meeting of the Defense and National Security Council on Wednesday to discuss the protests. And in Georgia, Parliament approved the law on foreign agents by 84 votes to 30 amid protests and controversy. The law will oblige media and organizations with more than 20% of foreign financing to register as agents with foreign influence. The European Union threatened Tiflis that its law on foreign agents could affect the country's integration into the community bloc. At the same time, the United States warned that with the approval of the mentioned law, the nation would be putting at risk its Euro-Atlantic integration. According to the Georgian Prime Minister, Irakli Kobachidze, the regulation complies with the basic legal principles and its only objective is the annual publication of the finances of non-governmental organizations, mass media and others. Critics see the law on foreign agents as a threat to democratic freedoms and the country's aspirations to join the European Union. The United States expects Georgian President Salom Zurabishvili to veto the bill on foreign agents in the country. For his part, the head of the International Affairs Committee of the Russian State Duma, Leonid Slutsky, said that only the people of Georgia and their parliament can decide under which laws their country lives. The Cannes Film Festival celebrated its 77th edition from 14 to the 25th of May, once again turning the luxurious French town into the epicenter of the seventh art in the competition for the Palme d'Or.
For 12 days, more than 35,000 people from different countries around the world will attend the festival screenings and walk through the aisles of the Marché du Film. In addition to representing films with a more independent presence, the event is also the most important festival of the European film industry. The official program for Cannes 2024 has revealed new details, images, and trailers of the most anticipated films to be seen, including 19 films from the official competition, the festival's most eye-catching section. The world's most important film festival rolls out the red carpet for veteran filmmakers such as the American director Francis Ford Coppola, who will present his film Megalopolis.
Time, stop!
The film is about an ambitious science fiction story starring Adam Driver as an idealistic architect on a mission to rebuild New York after a cataclysmic disaster, whose project clashes with the wishes of the corrupt mayor played by Giancarlo Esposito. Another film in the competition for the Palme d'Or is Kinds of Kindness by Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos, in which he again directs the American Emma Stone in a triptych fable that tells three stories: that of a trapped man who tries to take control of his own life, of a policeman terrified because his wife, who had disappeared at sea, has returned and looks like someone else, and of a woman determined to find someone with a special gift, destined to become a prodigious spiritual leader.
The moment of truth.
Travel
Isn't it wonderful?
This year's Cannes jury will be chaired by director Greta Gerwig, author of the hit film Barbie, who will award the top prize on May 25 to the successor of Anatomy of a Fall from French director Justin Triet, winner of last edition's honor.
And protests for better working conditions marked the start of the Cannes Film Festival. In an official statement published on Monday, the collective Sur le Coin La Dish launched a strike call for all those involved in the Cannes Festival and its parallel sections due to the increase of carelessness in the sector. The aim is to protest against the tightening of the rules of access to unemployment benefits decreed by the government of French President Emmanuel Macron, which according to the collective leaves festival collaborators who before the reform could apply for unemployment benefits without so many obstacles defenseless. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.